Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Apparently something glitched out a little bit, so it seems I'm back. Hopefully I didn't end up repeating myself too much here, but I'm going to go ahead and remute the chat. By the way, thanks quite a bit to my good old friend Laurence, who's on Skype, watching my back. So, this is actually very fortunate that this sort of thing is happening right now. Let me just briefly recap. Today we're going to be watching Hogil versus Stork coming up today. All action should be nice and fancy and good, and we're doing the whole series. I have 3 StarCraft 2 casts coming up this week, so definitely watch out for that. And you know, in a sense, I'm almost glad that the stream crashed because I had the wrong maps loaded up. I generally open up the maps that are listed underneath the game on YouTube, and apparently those are wrong. So just going to go a little change-a-roo up on that right now. Let me just see what the second map is. I'm going to cut forward a little bit. Is that... It appears that they have changed the name of Fighting Spirit to Bloodspot. Oh, isn't that nice and intimidating? So, going to go ahead and open up Bloodspot, or Fighting Spirit, as it's we more like to call it. And then we will transition right over to the main game in just one moment. I'm almost there. I promise I'm almost done. Loading them up and going right on over the main screen. Let's just transition here. Here we go. We have Game 1 of Stork against Hogil. Everything seems to be going nice normally in the stream now. Sincerest apologies for that. So yeah, let's just go ahead and open up this map. These are now the correct maps coming up here. I have this Great Barrier Reef thing somewhere. There it is. Sorry once again for my technical difficulties. That was entirely my bad. So yeah, this is El Nino, as it's like to be called. But what they did is they changed the tile set to blue, and they have to therefore make an entirely new name to confuse everybody. But everything that's awesome. If there's anything that's really awesome about a 3-player map is Zerg, is that you can get away with things like 9 pooling, 7 pooling is very popular on 3-player maps, putting a lot of pressure on that Protoss front early. It's a pretty big, wide open space. It's kind of funny because I was talking about that when the stream glitched and crashed, but this is a pretty wide open space. It's pretty large right there. So Protoss generally has a little bit of trouble defending that early on, so I like not only 3 starting positions, encouraging those early pools, but also the wideness of the space encouraging early pools. A lot of Protosses like favoring some sort of wall off here, getting the robotics facility so they can get some mobility back here, and then expanding to one of these back sides. Let's not spend too much time caught up on that, so that way we can actually get to all these games. And already this game starts out unbelievably kick-ass because we have a 5 pool incoming. Now this is less bullshit than you might think. A lot of people will see the 5 pool and be like, oh god, he's just trying to win right away. But you can actually transition out of a 5 pool pretty well. One of my favorite examples of this is, I believe it was Hyuk on Andromeda. He 5 pooled, and I thought it was again one of those ooh stupid cheese sort of things, but then he went straight from his 5 pool directly into a Hydra Lurker drop. And what was so amazing about it is that only a 5 pool would have put the Protoss at a timing such that he wouldn't have his Mineral Natural defended from the drop. So I think that's a very cool thing to think about, how to play off a 5 pool. And again, I haven't seen this game. Someone suggested it, that I do this whole series because it was short. And of course, I want to keep the viewership happy. So we're watching it right now. And let's see how Hogil's going to play it off. I'm kind of cheating because I can actually see the YouTube bar underneath right there. But notice we're making up to 6 drones. Haven't made an Overlord yet. This is a very common technique with 5 pooling to do the extractor trick. Would not be surprised if there was a drone being made there. Zerglings are also a reasonable choice. So Protoss, alas, is having to spot this. There's Stork looking very best-like today. He's looking very suave. So here's a nice little response by Stork. And I think this is very typical of a map like El Nino is what I'm going to call it. I'm not going to call it Great Barrier Reef. Or as it said on YouTube, Great Barrier Reef. I'm just going to keep calling it El Nino. To do this sort of response where we're pulling back like this, because, you know, it's tough to get our front defended in time. I mean, look that only now has Stork really begun building cannons in his base, and there's already these Zerglings at his front. Stork's going to have to rely on some nice micro. And see, this is pretty standard, a lot longer than I would have thought. And I would have assumed that that pylon would have been built a little bit farther north. That's kind of close. I mean, his intention is to cluster right here, but I like it scooted up just a little bit. Now, to be super gripey about little things, notice that this is probably the only really good position for that early cannon placement, because you can bounce back and forth between this geyser and defend your cannon really well. Up here, notice that cannon is built at the right side, so it's not defending that gas at the left. And I think that is an incredibly important factor that would motivate you to do some sort of early aggression, some early pooling, especially 5 pooling, is to say, man, in 2 of these 3 positions, it's going to be a little bit tougher to defend the gas geyser, so I'm going to go ahead and rush those. Actually, let's just look at the bottom right. Notice that we can't really... it's a little bit harder to bounce back and forth between this geyser because we have to make sure that we build our early pylon right. You know, it's doable, but this is my ideal spot to be as Protoss in terms of running my units around to glitch them properly. Here you can't quite glitch them on the correct side, so occasionally cannons get placed out of range of the cannon, and that's what we're seeing right here. So look at that nice little probe drill. The probe drill. Oh, actually, I take it back. I never considered this slide back like that. That's actually really, really, really good. I like that a lot. Never mind, I completely stand by Stork's cannon placement. But again, notice this cannon doesn't defend the outside of the gas. So great. In Hogil's spot, that's what you want to do. You want to force your opponent back there for as long as possible. Oops, let me move my giant orange ball. You want to delay the Protoss as long as possible in his main, and then just keep doing what you want to be doing. Look, the expansion's going up, and right now, if we ignore the fact that it was a 5 pool and forget all our preconceptions about what that entails, we are now rapidly on the way of having a 2-base Zerg against a 1-basing Protoss. More importantly, given the structure, we can easily get that 3rd. So pretty much we're guaranteed almost 3 bases coming up right now. So that's a little concerning. We don't want that to happen. That's such a cute little counter. But of course, any good player is going to be able to have this sort of junk go on, just forcing them through. Yeah, there we go. Oh. Maybe not. I'm curious if he's going to get it. Oh, okay, did get it through. So Stork did end up getting that delayed. That's so kick-ass. Oh, I love watching Stork play. Oh, and look, even these military people who are supposed to be defending them all are in fact clustered around to watch the 5 pool. And yeah, I mean, we have a 2-gate coming up, but it's a very delayed 2-gate. We're probably going to be getting sunks up at our front in time. Everything's going nice and dandy. So what's really important to consider right now is forget all your preconceptions of how StarCraft strategy works. Let's just think about how to make this 5 pool function properly. What are the reasonable responses? Well, hey, we're very certainly going to be up against some sort of 2-gate. Our opponent really can't afford to go for a fast geyser and get a Corsair out, or maybe even do a Dragoon Reaver push. He needs to get those 2 gates out, or else he'll be able to overrun his geyser a little too easily. We see Hogil poking around, keeping an eye on the gas. What time our opponent gets the gas is pretty important. I think that was horrendous that Hogil lost those 2 Zerglings right there. Super, super bad. Because those Zerglings are really your eyes inside the Protoss base, and if he doesn't have Speed Zealots, I mean, you can keep 2 Zerglings alive forever. Running them by the cannon is quite bad. But everything right now seems to be going pretty decently well for the Zerg. Should be in his bag right now. I'm a little surprised that he's expanding in his main. Probably encountered something in practice where if he expanded to this backdoor, if he expanded right there, then he may have gotten cannon, may have lost, or something like that. I still would favor exploring that quite a lot. And making yet another forge, expanding right now. And I don't think this is risky at all for Stork. I think it's actually a great response to expand relatively quickly. Really, if you open up 2-gate, you can get away with expanding quite quickly. So I like the fact that he's doing that. And he's also getting the forge to begin upgrades. There's a lot of ways that we can start planning once again for the late game, despite this early game hiccup. I think this is a good attempt by Protoss. This shouldn't work this well, because imagine if Hogil had kept those 2 Zerglings alive. This would have been denied way more easily. And this is actually the best way it could have turned out for Protoss, or excuse me, for Zerg, because you've invited the Protoss up your ramp. You're saying, come on, yeah, please, I welcome you. And then you just kill off all the Zealots, and it's 3 Zealots down the tube. And so that is a fantastic win for Zerg. Sometimes players, when they're in Zerg's spot, or even Protoss players who are concerned about Zerglings running into their base, they'll make so much defense at the front that they'll think, man, there's no way anyone could ever run by my front. When in reality, you want a defense more like Hogil's, where your opponent isn't quite sure, so he gives it a shot and ends up far behind as a result. Now, I'm not so sure I like Hogil's follow-through. That 5 pool put him in a wonderful position for the later stages of the game. But instead, it looks like he's going for some sort of 3-hatch all-in. And I don't think this is necessary. I think that there's a lot of follow-through cheeses you can do that are fun and fancy and all that sort of stuff. But in this particular circumstance, I mean, look at how far back the Protoss has to put himself. Look at all these cannons being built here for defense. There's going to be yet more cannons coming. You know, with a Protoss who needs to focus that much on defense, 12 Zerglings are going to keep the Protoss at bay for a long time, and then you can expand a bunch. I think that should be one of your greatest tools in StarCraft, is just to think, oh, can I expand right now? And a lot of times you can. A lot of times you can just expand so comfortably. You know, honestly, I would say for a lot of players who've maybe been playing for a year or two, just try to just start throwing down expansions really early on, and you'll be surprised how much you can get away with, and then it becomes a fun little task figuring out how to make your expansion work. And oftentimes you'll find a unique solution for certain situations. So definitely keep that in your books. I'm just double checking to make sure my stream is functioning properly due to that technical hiccup at the start. I'm almost certain that that was a result of me starting, stopping, and then starting the stream several times before actually going live, because I kept forgetting to change my outbound. But, you know, in this spot, if you're just going 3-hatch against a Protoss player who's been kind of set behind, think of the situation that your Protoss player's in. Yeah, he's going to be a little bit behind on money. He maybe had some struggles getting the cannons up at his front. There's not going to be stuff walled in there. But I think the most important one to note is that Protoss has 2 gateways. A lot of times the reason that these early Hydra busts work so well is the fact that there's generally one gateway at the front that isn't really constantly producing. Most of the players are just rushing straight for Corsair, getting the Citadel up really quickly. So there's not too much defense at the front, and I'm almost certain that this Hydra bust is not going to be very effective just because of that second gateway there. I mean, look how many Zealots there are. That means that these 5 cannons can get blocked for a really long time right here. I mean, if we're looking at the food counts already, I mean, Stork is a little bit ahead, not as ahead as you'd like to be in this matchup, but there's really not much follow-through that Hogil can even hope to do after this Hydra bust fails. Look at how brave Stork's getting right there. Not making any probes, just making sure that he can get enough stuff up. Yeah, look, now we're going to have 4 gateways coming up. You can start getting range for your Dragoons. You can start making a whole bunch of Dragoons. Very, very easy follow-up right now for Protoss to deal with. And yeah, going up, picking off a cannon, which is great, but I just don't think that it will ever be enough. Let's scoot this up just a noodle. There we go. And yeah, look, the Corsair's out, doing a ton of damage. We're going to glance back here. I don't know if we can see a Citadel up there, but Stork is just in such a comfortable spot, and I really attribute a lot of it to those 2 gateways that have been out for so long. So, I mean, in terms of 5-pool follow-throughs, going straight for Mutalisks afterwards is great, because you can keep pressure, you can keep map control on, but you don't have to commit to doing anything with your Mutalisks, and your Mutalisks are a lot more versatile. They can pick off pylons, they can pick off tech structures, they can pick off units and probes, and Protoss needs to build even more defense, but this Hydra bust, I mean, I just disagree with it. Now, one thing to note is that Hogil just played a grueling, almost 90-minute series with Lomo beforehand. I have seen those games, and those were some serious struggle games for Lomo. Let's actually talk about this attack right now. Running up, notice how he target fires these 2 cannons, and then he backs away a little bit. Fantastic, but there's too many Zealots. Stork's not even really backing off. He's just going for it, man. I do think Stork was correct, though, to build all these cannons. So I talk a lot about learning and how we make adjustments. A Protoss player in Stork's position here would probably say, hey, look, my Zealots are doing all this damage. Did I really need to make 6 cannons all the way at the top there? And I think that it's a reasonable thing to say, no, I probably didn't need them. I could have gotten away with all these units. But I think that getting this many cannons earlier on prevented a death that we didn't get to see here. In other words, Stork made a bunch of cannons, and there was a key period where Hogil could have attacked, but because those cannons were there, Stork would have been able to repel it relatively easily. And now we see all Stork's units rushing forward and doing a really easy job demolishing this big Hydra patch. Now it looks like Hogil doesn't really have very much defense, but I still think that these cannons were essential for deterring any sort of early aggression by Hogil that could have won Hogil the game early on. So I stand by Stork's decision to make all that defense. But again, to reiterate, I think that it's reasonable to say, maybe I could have gotten away with fewer cannons. And if you ever have that situation, early cheeses like this are very easy to test with partners. You say, hey man, can you 5-pool me and then go 3-hatch Muta, or 3-hatch Hydralisk, and then I'm going to try to get away with only building 3 cannons. And he's like, okay. And then he does the opening, you get in the situation, you save the game, and then you have him rush up right then and see if he can bust you. And then you reload and have him rush up after 20 seconds and see if he can bust you. And then you have him reload and see if he can run in 40 seconds afterwards. And you just do these tests. It generally takes under 30 minutes to do all that work, and you can get a whole lot of information out of it. Corsair running around, perhaps one of the most useful things for stopping constant Hydra attacks. The Corsair isn't going to be useful, obviously, with the first run-in, but for that second and third run-in, I mean, the Corsair's running around picking off Overlords. The Zerg feels committed to, constantly just barreling down your front, and as a result, this Corsair can run around and delay a whole bunch of stuff later on. So, nifty, thrifty, fancy, schmancy play going on by Stork. Look at how safe Stork's playing it. He's getting the Storm. That way he can never, ever lose, because Storm's awesome. And he's also expanding to the back. That's so safe. And he's adding on yet another cannon. I love that choice. Because let me actually come back and explain this, because it might seem a little counterintuitive. If you're in an obvious bind, or if you don't make defenses you're going to lose, you should make the defenses. A lot of times people make too many defenses for bad reasons. And one of those is, oh, I'm playing against a worse player, therefore I need more defense. Or, oh, I'm playing against a better player. I feel scared, I'm going to make more defense so I feel comfortable. And what you should really do is say, well, what is my opponent's race capable of? Therefore, how many do I need? So classic example is right here. Protoss players will sometimes make like, oh, well, I'll just make 3 cannons earlier on because he's an awful Zerg player, and that can screw you up a lot of times later. But in this situation, Stork has scouted around the entire map. He knows that his opponent has no economy whatsoever. He knows that there is not a next step in Hogil's play. Hogil needs to win now. So throwing down a whole bunch of cannons to possibly mess up any late-game plans for Stork is completely justified. Because in that circumstance, he has complete knowledge of what his opponent's doing. He knows that the only way he can lose is right now. So he may as well just 100% guarantee it's going to go on to the late game. So I really like this as an example of making excessive defense. Especially in a tournament situation, just to ensure the victory. But again, notice how important that complete information was. Notice how I emphasized, oh my god, Stork can see everything as a result of that Corsair. And here the observers are freaking out. Oh my god, is it going to be able to break in? I don't think so. I mean, the food comparisons are pretty close. I mean, it's 60 versus 86. That's a little bit less than Zerg wants to be. Generally, Zerg wants to be about 65, 70. But I mean, look at this big push coming in. I don't even think Protoss is going to back off. He's just going to float his High Templar down and, oh, yes, indeed. Getting off the storms. And this is the part where I get to just sort of halt my commentary because looks like Zerg's pretty much screwed, and I just get to go, man, Stork, you are so kick-ass. That is so sweet. Hooray, storms. And look at that, 33 food to 70 food. And look how nice it was to have that blanket of defense behind that attack. Note how Hogil immediately lost after that attack. If Stork had advanced forward and thrown some awful storms or something like that, Stork would have been like, uh-oh, lost a lot of his zealots, and then Hogil could have made a push up to the front. But with all that extra defense, no way it would have worked. So since I'm actually doing the entire series, we're doing a best of 3, you can, there's this concept of setting the tone in a series. This happens a lot more in best of 5s than it does in best of 3s. But the basic idea is that you throw something out in game 1 that really frightens your opponent. In best of 5s, you can get away with it in game 2 or 3. But for instance, this won't actually spoil anything. In Idra vs. Noni we saw today, Idra did a build that is very atypical of himself in game 1. And I really liked that he did that, because whether he'd end up winning or end up losing, it might make Noni go, huh, I'm not playing against the mechanical robot that Idra likes to make himself out to be, So that's one thing that's really cool about Hogil, who we've seen do a lot of this late-game, big-scale management type stuff, that in this best of 3, he's setting the tone, saying, you know what, I'm actually 5-pooling in game 1 after I've done this grueling match. It really lets Stork know that, you're here to play. Let's actually just briefly come back and look at Oops, not that map set, but this map set. We're actually playing on Fighting Spirit. Apparently renamed Bloodspot. Ooh, that's, that always strikes me as one of those names that's trying to be really, like, hip and cool, or trying to be all scary and creepy sounding, but not quite. It's like the name Blood Rat, you're trying to be intimidating, or like, oh, I'm Deadly Mechanism, that's my alias online. It's missing it a little bit. So if any of you are in the need of a not-so-threatening Smurf name, Bloodspot should be right up on the top of your list. This map, I don't like early pooling. I don't like 7 pooling, 9 pooling, 5 pooling, that sort of thing. Before Overlord, that is, because this is a pretty tiny... These chokes are a little bit easier to manage. They're not super thin, but I mean, they're thin enough that Protosses can develop quite a bit of comfort with them. So I don't think Hogil's going to favor that sort of play on this map. But again, because he set the tone in Game 1, because he let Stork know, hey, I actually am willing to 5-pool, Stork will probably be a little bit more cautious. But, Stork's a strong player. For the most part, what Zergs are going to want to do is, if Zerg's here, he's going to take this natural, and then he's going to take this one. And he's going to bounce back and forth and defend these two with Mutalisks, occasionally skipping it, just going mass Zergling. And he's going to control a lot of the game with air until he's able to take this and then sort of advance forward. Eventually taking this as a 5th, this expansion that's nice and tucked away in his defense. Protosses obviously are going to be early expanding, and I like if they take this relatively early and end up going for a Reaver after about 8 gateways. Players tend to get a little gateway happy. They know they can support 6 or 7 on 2 bases, and then when they take a 3rd base, they're like, all right, sweet, I'm going 15 gateways. They try to break the Zergs down, but... in general, I like getting the Reavers a little bit early, but especially on Fighting Spirit, where Zergs are so good at turtling at those natural bases that any amount of gateway units really is never going to be able to break in. Look at this guy. That's a Reaver. That has to be a Reaver. Either that or it's, the Pillsbury Doughboy and he's been slaughtered. Let's actually take another investigation at it. Inquire. Yeah, see, we want him to use scissors during the Star League. Yes, stab your opponents. And yes, look, Reaver, that has to be a Reaver. That's a very sad ghost who's eaten too much. Or the Pillsbury Doughboy, or other such assorted pastries. And look at how, I love Hogil. Oh, God. These are always the true signs of incredibly experienced players. And, of course, they want a nice Goodyear blimp to take part in this game, and they want nice toasted faces moving around. Some bread, I think, is what that player wants. Or perhaps that's a large clam that's desired. Use this ketchup in the match. Yes, it's been approved. Let's get back to the game. Alright, cool, we're back. A lot of times in intense matches, you see good players screw up. So, for instance, like Action has been increasingly looking very good in his Zerg vs. Terrans, but in the late game, he tends to not have quite enough focus in areas. You'll see a group of Zerglings just get walked over by Medic Marines and not retreat and that sort of thing. And you'll look at that and go, oh, he's clearly not very good. And some person might be like, oh, but it's his nerves getting to him. But there's always some signs that you'll see that means a player has a lot of experience in the matchup, and Overlord scouting patterns and control of those early Overlords are one of the most telling signs, and I love identifying these sort of things because it's so cool. It's one of my favorite things ever. Look, the Overlord goes right to the center of the map first, spotting for proxy gates, but not just that. Because it is a 4-player map, if you sent an Overlord like this and your opponent wasn't there, it's a long distance to go to here, if that's where your opponent's natural is, and an even longer distance to go to here. But if you scout to the center, you can get to the natural relatively quickly to see if there's any sort of zealot attacks coming out. Because think about it, you don't need the Overlord at your opponent's front ultra quickly in Zerg vs. Protoss. You need it there eventually, really. But you'd like to get it there maybe around the 3.5-minute mark or 4-minute mark or so, right when Protoss might be getting excited with his Zealots and might be moving out. And that's what's so cool about scouting to the center early, not just spotting the proxy gateways, but also scouting, or also being able to get to any of these 3... Oh, don't want to answer that phone call. Yeah, but being able to get to any of these 3 locations as quickly as possible. And I think that's really just fantastic. Because it's that issue of time scouting that I was talking about earlier on, where a lot of people scout just to ease their minds because they're thinking, oh, well, I really want to know what he's up to. I don't want to, lose to anything ridiculous early on. And I don't even want to say 90% of the time. I want to say 100% of the time that scouting wasn't necessary. And thinking about later scout timings is really important. That's why we see players scouting after their gas. You know, they'll go they'll go pylon gate gas, and then they'll scout. And Zerg, you see a little bit less of that, and that's what I love about that Overlord scouting pattern. So, of course, I was spending a lot of time talking about that because there really wasn't that much extraordinarily different going on right here, except I'm a little surprised by Hogil's choice of expanding there. Again, I haven't seen this game, and I have some issues with that. The one advantage this does get is it helps us secure this region right here, because if we've taken these two bases and then we've expanded here, often Protoss will move down here, and they'll actually elevator units up like this. We saw Khal do that against Savior in one of the early matches on Fighting Spirit. And when we do that sort of elevator move, it can give a lot of problems to the player who's just planning on turtling all game long. But I don't know if that's enough of a concern that we wouldn't want to expand here. Expanding here, yeah, it does tighten us off also to airdrops and that sort of thing with this nice little triangle in the corner. But I'm curious to see how Hogil will play it off. Looks like he's going for some sort of hyper turtling, just making sure he can get control of his ramp right away. But still, I don't know if it's justified. I just think that the advantages you get by taking that other main early on and how easy it is to turtle is huge. And look at Stork, you know, just having to use probes for defense. A lot of times we see players build another pylon right there, just tightening that wall a little bit more. And unfortunately, it looks like Hogil is going to get to see exactly everything that's going on in Stork's base. With a pesky little Zergling, he can do some damage. What you want to do with that Zergling, even though we're not seeing it right now, we just kind of get the health updates here at the bottom. Oh, it's taken off. Hit the gas workers. Don't ever hit the mineral workers, because good players are very skilled at just glitching them right away. But those gas workers, I mean, there's only 2 out at any point in time, so we'll be have a little bit of trouble microing to kill them off. And if you can prevent your Protoss opponent from ever having just a little bit less gas, it's hugely beneficial. Oh my God, does it help? You'd be blown away. Just having, you know, 1 or 2 guys off the gas every now and again, that's like 50 less gas than he would have had. Really big difference when you're trying to get your timings out very smoothly as Protoss. You have the Zealot running around trying to do his little thing. You know, even if the Zealot does no damage and dies, it's still drawing focus, forcing those Zerglings not to be in more useful spots, like in the middle of the map. Notice how there's pretty much no vision in the center of the map for Protoss. And this Overlord that once upon a time was nearby the base is now getting killed off. But notice that Overlord did a lot of good. It was able to get in there, see what the timings were. Very, very useful, all related back to that early center scout. And the Zealot trying to do some magic right here. Man, that always pisses me off. See how that Zergling died? I can have infinity Zerglings attacking a Zealot, and that Zealot will always kill one friggin' Zergling before it dies. And I always feel so bad for that one. I mean, yeah, you're saying, Dave, why don't you micro? But I'm always too busy clenching my fists and teeth going, God, don't die. Ugh, drives me nuts. It's like imbalanced. Zealots need to be nerfed. And the Spire is going down. Everything's nice and normal. Still the thing I'm looking for. Has our Zerg player really taken advantage of the fact that he's expanding to this third instead of down here early on? I think he is, because he got that 4th hatch up so early on. I've actually done this style quite a lot on Coliseum, actually, is where I enjoyed doing it. What ends up happening is that you need the Hydralisks to defend against the Corsairs early on, which is fine. Notice him clustering all his Hydralisks together. And then you eventually get the Spire to manage those numbers, but for any early push or any early aggression, you use the Hydralisk to deal with them. And it's quite nifty. And because you got that 4th hatch out early on, how do you take your 4th base? Well, you can actually just walk a whole bunch of units over there, and you will have that whole bunch of units. Works out so nicely. And look, oh yeah, getting a creep colony there, getting some Sunkens up. There's a Hydralisk there who's going to puke all over these Corsairs for a little while. And this is, you know, obviously very annoying to deal with. You know, be a little careful with your Hydralisks. I think Hogil tried to get a little too greedy, and then this sort of thing can happen, and that's obviously no good. Definitely make sure that those are Overlords making... Oh, he made a Spore Colony. That's cool. Or alternatively, make a Spore Colony. But one thing that's telling, notice that... Look at how early that Evolution Chamber ended up coming out. You can get that +1 up very quickly. He's making sure he's not putting it just to the one use of the +1 upgrade. He's also getting that Spore Colony at the bottom, because he's probably had a little difficulty managing it, and I do not know how this happened. Oh, there's the shuttle. That's hilarious to me. You know, like, I was actually talking beforehand, I was like, oh, he doesn't need to worry about anything here if he expands to these 2 bases. Stork's like, whatever, penetrates right in here. By the way, if a player does have these 3 bases, this is the only good drop path, right here. And it's actually very close to this ramp. I'm not actually just swinging in between the 2 expansions haphazardly. I do specifically mean right here is the important place right here if you want to squeeze drops in. We've seen a lot of players do that. We normally have a rally point right here. We normally have units right here. So just this narrow region, just skirting off that ramp a little bit, is how you can get in there and get out. And this is huge if he takes this out. Oh my god, is that going to be a pain in the ass to deal with. Holy crap, that may have just won Stork the game right there. And notice that I just said Stork may have won the game right there, and if that didn't work, Stork's just lost 2 Dragoons, or a Dragoon and 2 Zealots, which is not a huge loss for a player who's going Corsair Reaver. He needs the Dragoon and the Zealot early on so he doesn't die to Ling Bust or Hydra Bust, but at this stage in the game, it's a little bit less useful, so he can afford to make that sacrifice at exactly that point in time, and it occasionally ends up paying off huge, but it's not so risky that he'll lose the game later on if it fails miserably. Oh, and look, here's the big Zealot push coming out. This is probably my favorite build to see Protoss players do. I don't want to execute it because it's very difficult. It's very technical. Okay, he's backing off. But the build I'm referring to is to go Corsair straight into Reaver, and then get the Citadel and get 4 or 5 gateways, pour out Zealots. Generally ends up being closer to 4. And I like this for a couple of reasons. The Corsair is obviously going to be getting a lot of control going on. You can move around the map more freely. You get to do harass with this shuttle. I mean, all the usual Corsair Reaver stuff is fantastic. But also, if we go back and look at the map, if we take this top base, when we land a Reaver here, it can really easily manage this thin, tiny ramp. And we can even bounce back for defense here. So we can actually end up taking this third pretty damn quickly. And if we get to that critical 4 or 5 gateway count to do an early push with our Speed Zealots, 4 or 5 gateways are not really that expensive if you're going Zealot Templar. So again, another reason why expanding is very, very safe afterwards. The reason that I don't recommend this to new Protoss players is that you need to have fantastic control and absolutely razor-sharp focus with that shuttle to make sure you're not losing it. Yeah, look at how instantly he pulled back. That's very, very, very easy to screw up. So, I mean, very commendable play by Stork to be able to maneuver around with such finesse. And I'm still eager to see if Stork's going to be expanding early on. And notice, part of the reason Hogil might be doing this build, as opposed to taking this, is that he encountered this in practice. And look how easily Hogil is repelling all of this. Fairly even right now. Look, uh-oh, you want to try to get in there? No, no, you have to back away. And look at the ultra-fast expansion, calling it. Thoughts bucketed. Day 9 sure brought the Thought Hammer down on that one. Oofsie daisies. Look, doesn't even have Zealot speed yet. And he might have a little bit of issues with that. Or maybe, oh yeah, now he has Zealot speed. Fantastic. And just sort of getting ready to expand. Still, just 4 gateways, getting the Templar out. Yeah, look, oh man, I feel like such a clairvoyant. Every now and again I call it like it is, but man, dead on the money this time. And of course I get to gloat because it's my show. LOL! Please, please keep watching. Oh my goodness, and look at that management. Oh yes, notice that the Reaver is midway between the 2 ramps. It's not all the way to the right or all the way to the left where those Hydralisks seem to be threatening. It's right in between so it can hit both of them and have the least amount of damage dealt to it, if in case there is some sort of bust-in. And notice that we haven't actually seen any cannons in the main yet. Part of the reason is because he killed off the Spire, but also, I mean, we've seen a lot of Corsairs. Really nice benefit of doing this early build. We get all those Corsairs out, don't storm your Observer. Ooh, fantastic storm job there. Nice little push in action, and we're going to fall back because this doesn't look so good. This is perhaps the one vulnerability of any build that opts to take this top area is this region right here. The big fat bridge can end up giving you a lot of problems, and a lot of Zergs are not going to try to kill you right away. They're just going to try to cut in. They're just going to try to split the distance between your main and this expansion. And it opens up opportunities like this. I even think it's okay if you can't break this expansion, just to hang out right here and force your opponent to walk across a bunch of lurkers when he wants to move out. Lone Zealot can't stop the Hydra onslaught. We're seeing some blue units goop up the side of the map, and there's that wonderful little shuttle. Oh, isn't that fantastic, the fact that he can do that? Notice how far back he drops it, and he does indeed repel it. Pretty significant loss for Zerg, but Zerg's still in relatively good shape because he got those hatcheries up so early. And this is what I love about watching Hogil's play. By the way, don't lose those overlords, that's bad. Be careful with your overlords. But look at that bottom expansion. Yeah, at the bottom left. Oh, totally kick-ass. Hogil isn't just trying to do some sort of all-in to kill his opponent. This is just the standard pressure. Look, again, exploiting this region in between the two bases. And it frees up time to go take that bottom left expo. And look at the utility of this shuttle. It was just up at the top, trying to defend that expansion, bouncing back here, preventing anything nasty from going on. And Zerg, look, the usual sort of cut-in. You know, I mean, I can't stress this enough. In StarCraft, as well as really in any strategy game, it doesn't even matter. Let's actually look at this in both maps. If there are two bases, like, let's do a few examples here. Like, for instance, this one and this one. You don't want to attack here or just attack there. You want to cut in between them and then go for one of the two of them. That is the best way to hit expansions. If my opponent has this one and this one, try to get right here between them and then go to this expansion. If we look over here at the Great Barrier Reef, aka El Nino, what if our opponent has taken this base and this one? We want to work up here and then go for one or the other. Very common technique. Look, it forces our opponents to run through any defenses we set up, you know, so he'll be running through mines, he'll be running through siege tanks, he'll be running through burrowed lurkers and that sort of thing. Obviously, really difficult for the defender to manage that sort of aggression. I don't know if Hogil has 6 hatches. He might. That'd be really cool. Seeing that sort of aggressive play, that'd be very Shine-like. But yeah, and it forces our opponent's army to be split up. I mean, even though it looks like Stork has some units up here and some units up here, so he's okay. If Hogil gets enough stuff to attack somewhere, that means that all of Hogil's army is up against half of Hogil's army, no matter where Hogil intends to attack. And look at this nice little bust going on at the front, picking off the Templar. Oh, not before the Reaver gets a shot off. Oh yeah, oh yes indeed. Take out those Corsairs. Oh, I'm loving this Zerg play. This is fantastic. All because of cutting in. A very important concept. I call that a cut-in. Getting in between two expansions before you choose to attack one or the other. And we have some observers wandering about. Still would like to see a Spire and some Scourges out and about the map. I think that is the only real way to control this sort of shuttle action. In fact, really, with any good Zerg build, you should be thinking, "Ah!" Or you can just kill the shuttle off. Who needs Scourge? And you can do that. Jesus. But really, in any Zerg build, think of how you can incorporate that Spire relatively early on, because drops are going to be an issue you need to deal with no matter what you're doing. The one thing that was nice about that shuttle drop, it may have seemed like it failed miserably, but I mean, look at the Zerg's units. All of them are now exiting the Zerg's base, and we're starting to see that the Protoss has just now gotten to waltz forward and get control outside his fat bridge, or should I say inside his fat bridge. I just wanted the opportunity to say fat bridge a couple times. And Hogil, you know, doing a pretty good job of defending it, but he lost a little bit of something there. Not the biggest deal. I mean, this is looking more like a normal Zerg vs. Protoss, but it was pretty cool that he was able to have that much defense there for that long. And be that into Stork's face, killing off the Forge, killing off that gateway. Yeah, there's the Scourgy. There's a little Scourge, researching once again, getting those Reavers out. And you heard me mention beforehand that I like it when the Protoss, once he gets his third, doesn't do something like just go 10, 12 gateway, just try to mass gate his opponent to death. Instead, I preferred this more gentle gateway count, something around 7, 8, but getting Reavers with that additional money. And that's what's so totally, profoundly kick-ass of Stork's build, is that Stork actually already has the Reaver tech up. He already has the speed shuttle research finished. Now he can do these pushes very aggressively early on, and it's super threatening. It's almost like Stork got to rush to a late game army. I think that's one of the most neglected aspects of going Corsair Reaver, is that any later transition you choose to do, it means that in the late game you already have all that Reaver tech done. You already have all the necessary components to it. By the same logic, this is why we like Dark Templar dropping a Terran player. We already have our tech half done for Arbiters. And of course, Hogil continuing to play it out nice and strong. This is Hogil's big strength in this matchup, doing this big lurker muta defense and expanding all over the place. I love watching him do this, and Hogil still manages to have this incredibly, marvelously large army wandering all over the middle of the map, being able to do counterattacks and this sort of thing. Only getting Mutalisks once that Corsair count is pretty low. And getting the Templar. And, you know, let's just pause for a moment and describe what we've seen in terms of the scope of the series, because in all tournament situations, whether you're trying to or not, you end up thinking a little bit about what happened in the match beforehand. And Hogil 5-pooled and all-in that first match. And in the second match, we're seeing Hogil open up with 4 hatches before he gets his Spire, and doing a pretty big macro-oriented but very aggressive play as well. And now we're seeing Hogil expand around the map, sort of getting into his groove. Now we have Mutalisk wandering around and sniping this. Very, very strong play by Hogil. And I'm also loving how sharply it's contrasted with the first game's setup. This is dangerous for Protoss. Look at these food differences, 141 to 153. In general, it should be closer to something like 110, 120 to 150, 160, something like that. The fact that Zerg is only 10 food behind indicates to me that Zerg is in an incredibly comfortable circumstance. The only situation in which I wouldn't say that Zerg is way ahead is if Zerg didn't have a 4th, if it was just 3 base versus 3 base. And even then, Zerg's pretty okay. That's pretty even. But right here, it's really all going to come down to whether Hogil can control this properly. Look how many units he has. Jesus. Uh-oh, easy there, Shuttles. Trying to do a little damage to the Dragoon, can't be bad. Swerving around, oh my god, those Hydros are a little bit too clustered. Oh, easy there. Ooh, those were some nasty Reaver shots. Look at this incredible push job. Notice the emphasis on Dragoons. We don't quite need so many Zealots, because the Reavers are going to be clearing out a lot of the front lines. That's why we like that Dragoon-Reaver combo, not just because it's a good split of money, but because it's a great, you know, who's attacking the... It's a good... let me try that again. Dragoon Reaver is good because it's good against both melee units and ranged units. Wasn't that easy? I don't know why that was so hard for me at first. Just had to trip over my words a good bit. Didn't quite have enough caffeine before the cast. All the adrenaline was out of my system due to the awesome matches in the TSL round of 8. And see, what's weird to me is that this attack could have gone beautifully for Zerg. I'm actually going to re-review this because notice how Hogil lost convincingly right there. Look, the food beforehand, I was blown away at the fact that it was 143 to 153. And now it's 83 to 144. Almost doubling the Zerg's food. There's a lot of lurkers back here. This is just pure disorganization. And oh my god, am I ever going to make an example out of this game. This is fantastic. Oh man. I mean, regardless of the fact that Hogil lost, and I do like Hogil, you know. This is an unbelievably good illustration of a concept I like to emphasize a bunch, which is macro. Macro, macro, macro. How important is macro? Now, let's pretend that this wasn't a really big tournament situation. I'm actually going to let it, you know, play out to the GG. Let's pretend that this was a practice game where we're just playing on Icy Cup or Zerg. And the question is, oh yeah, look at this big smile on Stork's face. He knows that Hogil had to have made a big mess up in this game. But, you know, let's pretend this is a practice game. Let's pretend that we were just doing this for fun. You know, we're trying to work on this build. My god, are we ever in a fantastic situation? Look, we've gotten to snipe a Templar. Even sniping 1 or 2, which is what's going on right here, is a big, big benefit. Now, how do we want to hit this army? Well, it has a whole bunch of Reavers, has a whole bunch of High Templar in it. It's one of those big late-game armies. We want to wait till it's in a good position to surround. So, for instance, I wouldn't mind if Hogil did a dance here and then waltzed his main army up here, And of course, send some Zerglings up here to make sure no expanding is going on up here. But pulled a bunch of his army over here, and then when the Protoss was right here, hitting it from above and from below. Or even having some units pull up here, and then some units, pull up here, and then taking his Mutapack, one control group of Hydras here, having 2-3 control groups of Hydras here, and the remainder coming from below. Because let's look at the 2 phases of attack, I guess I'd call it, that Hogil was doing. Yeah, so Hogil's trying to do some magic stuff here. These Mutalisks getting way too overeager. See, now this part right here should have been pulling back a little bit early, but right idea in mind, right? Trying to delay a little bit. Yeah, look how long those guys hung there. Let's actually go through that in the moment. Alright, so right now, Mules should be doing a little bit of stuff. I just like how they ran in there, so get a few shots off, and now Zerg should be backing off. He sees the shuttles, back away, back away, back away. Ooh, almost a full 5 seconds of hanging out. Look at that, full control group gone, because of 5 seconds of no focus. And of course you don't have to do that big attack that we saw the Zerg doing, but just something, to think about. And there's the Mutalisk pack over here, pulling back. And now let's watch the disorganization of this attack. There's the units running up north. Should have been happening earlier on. But first we're going to lose a Lurker. We're going to lose about another control group and a half of units. The Mutalisks are going to come in. The Mutalisks are going to all but evaporate, right? And then we're going to lose some more units underneath. And look, Hogil's trying to get some stuff going on from behind. 26 kill Reaver. Look, more units. Probably another good 2-3 control groups. And then look, here's the rest of the attack. This attack doesn't go as horribly as I would have expected it to. And look, there's the Mutalisk hanging out there. I think that this could have been cleaned up. It only looks like 14 or so Dragoons and 4 Reavers, which if you have a good surround with a whole bunch of units, you're going to be able to take out quite effectively. So I think that that would be the lesson that I learned. So again, why would I think that was such a good example? I always say you need to macro really, really well. Because if you have great macro and all your build is going super smoothly, and you look at that battle, you get to look at that battle and you go, man, I screwed up my control there. Ugh, gross. How do I fix it? I just need to be a little bit more calm about pulling my units back, repositioning everything, and then I can hit it right outside my front there, and I'll be able to win the game there. It's very easy to see what that adjustment is if your macro's been good, if your build's been going very smoothly. All the adjustments you make are obvious. But now, if Hogil was in this situation, and he controlled everything perfectly, and he flanked it, and it didn't quite work, was it his build? Was it his bad macro? It's kind of hard to tell if your macro's not supreme. So that's why I think that's a fantastic example. And let's go ahead and take some questions. So let's see right here. Let's take some brief ones first. First question was, would Hogil have had better success if he had upgraded his Hydras at all in Game 1? Or was it part of his plan to get as many Hydras as possible in all in? So really, that question by Yuhihi is that, let's not think of it in terms of upgrades versus not upgrades. Let's think of it in terms of long-term versus short-term. Upgrades are obviously very useful, but they cut into what's happening right now in the game. That's, why we see Terrans who opt for really fast armory generally have like 2, sometimes 3 less factories early on, because it's just an expensive thing to do. And Hogil, for some reason, his plan early on, 3 hatches on 2 bases as opposed to 3 hatches on 3 bases, that is just like, I want to try to kill you early on right away. And honestly, if you're going for some sort of all-in, getting upgrades is real dangerous. That'll actually damage your all-in. So the brief answer I would give is, no, I don't think Hogil would have been better off if he'd opted for that +1 attack upgrade early on. However, I think that Hogil would have had much more success if he did a non-all-in build where +1 upgrades was a component of it. There's a lot of stuff you can get away with given that setup. So, let's see. Turbo T says, hey, Mr. Plot. Hello. I'm having problems opening Lurker and keeping the Protoss in his base. I either get surprised by too many Corsairs, and great issue. Turbo T says, I haven't got the APM for effective Corsair sniping with Hydralisks. Let's see. So I either get surprised by too many Corsairs, or it ends up with the Lurkers falling down, and once the Lurker contain's gone, there's the mid-game control that's an issue. Yeah, I totally understand that issue with, the Lurker contain, and then all the Corsairs pop out, and then all the And then a lot of times when the Corsairs don't pop out, the mid-game army comes and crushes you. So this is what I would say. First of all, what is the purpose of your early Lurker Contain? A wonderful Lurker Contain example I can think of is when Go Rush played against Bisu in a best-of-5, either for the quarterfinals and the semifinals of the MSL, but it was on Python. And in that game, the Contain was just there to win the game. Go Rush's entire purpose was, I'm going to contain you until you run out of resources and you're just dead. And that's fine. And if that's the issue you're trying to work with, then I would think of ways to scourge the Corsairs early on, to focus on perhaps not setting up the contain so quickly, not rushing for the contain, but instead getting the whatever they're called, the Scourge. So that way you can kill off all the Corsairs, then getting Overlords with speed, and then setting up the Contain with Lurkers. And you'll be surprised at how easy it is to do. There's a pretty wide window where you can start the Contain. So trying to push that as far off as possible, that's okay to do. The other thing I would say is, you don't even have to contain someone to death. You can just get the Lurkers outside his front, kill off that forge, that gateway that's outside the front, expand and just build up a bunch, and then when he comes to bust out, unburrow and retreat a lot. It's getting increasingly difficult for Zergs to just straight up contain like that, so I would definitely put those considerations in. Whoopsie daisies, I accidentally may have banned some people. Oh, thank God I didn't. Okay, let's just take a handful of other questions. No, I don't want to be banning these accounts. Whoopsie daisies. Sorry, there's this new I just got new Procaster software, so it's actually working a lot better, this stream. But I keep clicking on people, and there's this nice little ban button next to their name. So it's it's easier to ban people, but a lot of times I just want to take their questions. So I'm like, oh, you asked a fantastic question. Get out of my stream. Ban forever. Let's go ahead and try to fix that a little bit. Let's see a little bit. Let's check out here. Ooh, there's a lot of good questions. People asking me to make Overlord noises only on special occasions, such as birthdays. Here's a great question. I Love Uve, who is no doubt the real I Love Uve in the channel, says, how could Hogil have avoided the Spire loss? I think that this is a little bit of an unusual circumstance, where you have played so much in practice and you've just never encountered someone trying to sneak a shuttle in at that stage, given your build. So I would say the easiest thing to do is to shift your rally point down a little bit. So if we actually move over here to the main screen, it looked like Hogil had his rally right here, clustered here. But I think if he'd maybe moved it forward here and had some units there, I mean, it's pretty hard to tell if there would have been an effective way for him to deal with it. So maybe it's a guaranteed sort of effect that's going on by Stork. But those are the sorts of things that I would think about, but not stress too much of. I would probably emphasize getting about 6 Hydralisks early on instead of just the 4 it seemed that he was doing, because then I think he'll be able to defend it. So, Into the Wannabe says, as a Zerg, I'm very paranoid when Stork pushed to 6. Let's see. Oh, I know what the question is. Into the Wannabe says that he's feeling paranoid when Stork is pushing downwards because he's worried that Stork's going to move down and hit that bottom expansion. Again, just to refer to the map, Into the Wannabe is saying, yeah, when Protoss moves like this, when I'm Zerg, I think, oh my god, what if he moves down here to attack this? First of all, I want to demonstrate that how much that it's just the same idea of the cut-in. The Protoss player moves here, and now is threatening this base, and this base, and has cut off all the circulation for Zerg. So that's a super important thing to know. But what I would say is that Hogil had a whole bunch of nice stuff set up at this ramp, and what he'd probably want, actually, is for the Protoss to move like this. And then if Protoss move down here, Zerg repositions some stuff here, and then it hits Protoss right here at the natural. And I would say that does take a lot of time and practice to execute properly, but it's absolutely 100% possible. So that, I think, is something to consider. When you can hit him at the last possible moment in some way that's advantageous to you. So in this game, we saw when Stork attacked the front, Hogil could have done a really nice crunch on that bridge. Or if Stork had went and attacked the bottom left expansion, attacked the 4th base, still a nice little sandwich that you can do as Hogil. And that's why we also saw Hogil bring a lot of units from the left at the late stage of the game. If you want to rewatch the game, you can see that, Hogil bringing units from the left. Hogil had units there anyways to make sure that crunch would be as effective as possible. So let's just take one more question, randomly choosing. Oh yeah, so Red Zeppelin says, in similar situations to Game 2, I'm having trouble controlling multiple groups effectively to surround. I think I'm hotkeying correctly, but I want your advice on how you would control large groups in that situation. So, The general technique I use is that I have 1, 2, 3, 4 as units, and I like to keep 5 to 0 for my hatcheries so I can keep my macro as strong as possible. But I break things into groups of 12 with a lot of distance between them. Sometimes people will send like 24 non-hotkeyed Hydralisks to a location, and then when they want to attack, they box send, but then there's 2 or 3 Hydralisks left over, so they have to box send once again. This is the sort of thing I would want to set up. I would have, my Mutalisks as 1, and then 2, 3, 4 as Hydralisks that I would aim to pull around to the back. Those would be the Hydralisks that I would put into a flank position, or to do some sort of surround. So I'd be pulling all my stuff around back here, or pulling it up to here. And then, since I know I want to crunch them here, I would pull units back and have 12 here, 12 here, 12 over here, and then another 12 at the front. So when he attacks, I box this guy, then this guy, then this one, then this one. So all of them end up being clumped in one ball to advance forward. And then I do 1A, 2A, 3A, 4A, and that ball comes all in at once. And in other words, with my non-hotkeyed units, I space them out farther away from where I want them to be attacking. So that way, if I send them one at a time, if I start with the back units, they all move in together in one nice solid lump, and that's very easy to control. So you know what? We've been going for about 55 minutes now. I'll just happily take yet one more question. So Flying Siege Tank says, should Stork have attacked earlier in 2 waves and tried to wear the Hydras down the first time, and then the second attack killed him? I think a lot of times it's easy to fall into the I want to attack him earlier and earlier and earlier boat. But I like these big timed attacks like that, and I think Stork handled it perfectly. Stork knew that his attack was geared towards making use of the Reavers. I think if Stork attacked too early, he wouldn't really have had that many ground units, so he would have had like 3 or 4 Reavers and like 12 Zealots and 2 Templar, which die pretty quickly to a lot of Hydralisks. By waiting, he gets that big mass that the Reavers can really take advantage of, that the Reavers can move around freely and avoid being target fired. So I really like Stork's second attack, even though it lets the Zerg, I like Stork's late first attack. Even though Zerg got the opportunity to expand all over the place, I think that there's virtually no way that the Zerg could have held it off in any effective fashion. So, I don't think there's any way that Zerg would have been able to lose if Stork had moved out really, really early. So I like Stork's timing, making it a little bit more of an even game. So you know what? That is going to wrap up Day 9 Daily number 68. We have Day 9 Daily number 69 coming up tomorrow, and we're going to hit Day 9 Daily number 70 this week. Yes! Going to be doing a StarCraft 2 analysis. I'm going to try to do a little bit more research before that one, because the intention of my last cast was to be as naive as possible in my analysis, to say, hey, look, I am going to be looking at this game from a no knowledge perspective, from just a StarCraft 1 perspective. And then tomorrow, I'm going to be doing a little bit more analysis. Oh, God, people messaging me on AIM. Oh, I'm so popular. Yeah, I'm going to be doing an analysis with more knowledge, so that way I can perhaps comment on what's going on in the game that is specific to StarCraft. So, StarCraft 2, excuse me. So that is going to be it. I'm going to wrap up this cast, and thanks so much for tuning in. Watch for 3 StarCraft 2 casts this week. Ta-ta.